Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. It's been a crazy month or two for me, and this past week leading up to Memorial Day, I've been traveling for ministry. So since it's a holiday week, I thought I would replay a previous episode of Sue's Healthy Minutes. So I decided I would go back and listen to the episode from last year for Memorial Day. I enjoyed it so much that I thought it was definitely worth playing again for you today. If I enjoyed hearing it again, then surely you would as well. It is such a great reminder about being the salt of the earth. I hope you and your family have a wonderful holiday and take time to remember those who gave their life for our freedom, especially our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who paid the ultimate price that we might have life and have it more abundantly. I hope you enjoy the salt of the earth, and thank you for listening today. I'll be back next week for more It's the Bread stories. It's Memorial Day, a day of remembering all those who have given their lives for our freedom. General Douglas MacArthur, in honor of Memorial Day, said these words, "No man is entitled to the blessings of freedom unless he be vigilant in its preservation." Inspired by these words of General MacArthur, I thought it would be fitting today to share with you the truths about one of the oldest and greatest preservatives of all times, one given to us by God: salt. You might be thinking, what does salt and Memorial Day have in common? Well, more than you might think. Memorial Day, originally known as Decoration Day, originated in the years following the Civil War. The Civil War, which ended in the spring of 1865, claimed more lives than in any conflict in U.S. history and required the establishment of the country's first national cemeteries. By the late 1860s, Americans in various towns and cities had begun holding tributes in the spring to these countless fallen soldiers, decorating their graves with flowers and reciting prayers. In May of 1868, a General John A. Logan, the commander-in-chief of the Union veterans group known as the Grand Army of the Republic, issued a decree that May 30th should become a nationwide day of remembering the more than 620,000 soldiers killed in the recently ended Civil War. On Decoration Day, as Logan called it, he said that Americans should lay flowers and decorate the graves of the war dead, whose bodies now lie in almost every city, village, and hamlet churchyard in the land. Now, you might be wondering what the Civil War has to do with salt. Well, though you may be familiar with the history of Memorial Day, what you may not know is that the very outcome of the Civil War was greatly influenced by the demand for salt. In the American Civil War, one of the strategies of the North was to limit the availability of salt to the South. Throughout the Civil War, the Union attacked the South's salt production facilities. As the South lost access to their salt supplies, they could not preserve their food nor cure their meat, so critical in the hot climate of the South. As salt supplies dwindled, the troops could not be fed properly. The decline in the availability of salt played a vital role in the weakening of the Southern troops. Today, Like wheat, grains, and bread, salt has earned a less than desirable reputation. But in ancient times, salt was as valued as gold. In Greece, slaves were bought with salt, and in Rome, soldiers were paid in salt, or salarium argentum, which is where we get our English word for salary. Ancient governments were often financed by salt taxes, and many wars were fought and either won or lost over salt. You might even remember that it was the high cost of bread and salt that helped fuel the famous French Revolution. Without salt, life itself is simply not possible. Contrary to popular belief, real salt is more than just sodium chloride and is in fact a life-giving essential nutrient. It's worth remembering that in a life-threatening emergency, the first life-saving response is to administer an IV of a normal saline solution. Yep, salt. Unfortunately, today, like so many other once healthy foods, salt has been refined. For years, I wondered why. Why refine something that doesn't spoil and is in fact a preservative? Unrefined salt contains over 80 minerals and other elements necessary for life. But these trace minerals and elements are stripped away in the refining process of salt, leaving only sodium chloride. Salt is harvested from salt mines as brine and is refined through a high heat and evaporation process. Prior to evaporation, the brine is treated with chemicals such as sulfuric acid and or chlorine to remove the minerals, often referred to as impurities. During evaporation, the salt is exposed to high heat that changes the molecular structure of the salt so that it does not readily absorb moisture. Next, anti-caking agents are added, as well as sugar as stabilizers so that the added iodine remains in the salt. Most of these chemical additives are known for their harmful effects on the human body. So, why is the salt refined? Well, manufacturers believe that an all-white product that doesn't readily clump is more marketable to consumers. You might be familiar with the popular marketing slogan of one brand of salt: when it rains, it pours. Also, these so-called mineral impurities that are removed are considered byproducts and are sold to other industries for a very lucrative side business. Does all this sound familiar? It should. In his book, Your Body's Many Cries for Water, Dr. Faridun Batmanglij stresses the importance of the salt and water connection in the body. He writes of the importance of salt in the body to maintain proper balance between the extracellular and the intracellular fluids. He refers to these fluids as the oceans within the body. The extracellular ocean, as he calls it, contains white blood cells, red blood cells, as well as vitamins and minerals. The intracellular ocean contains the interior structures of the cell. These two oceans are in constant flux. Unrefined salt is the substance that nourishes both of these oceans. The sodium in unrefined salt is primarily concentrated in the extracellular ocean, while the potassium concentrates in the intracellular ocean and is necessary for proper cell hydration. Other minerals such as calcium and magnesium share in helping the two oceans communicate with each other. Refined salt lacks potassium and other minerals, and it will not nourish this intracellular ocean. The osmotic pressure of the refined sodium in the extracellular ocean will pull water from the interior of the cell, leaving the cell in a dehydrated condition. The long-term ingestion of refined salt can lead to cellular problems as well as the onset of chronic illness. As with other refined foods stripped of their vital nutrients, refined salt is a poor food choice. Sodium chloride, as a salt, was never meant to be ingested without its complementing trace minerals. Without the balancing effect of the trace minerals, refined salt provides the body with too much sodium. Coupled with the high sodium or refined salt content of processed foods, creates an even greater imbalance. The consequence of ingesting large amounts of refined salt are mineral deficiency, imbalance of intra and extracellular fluids, increased acidity in the body, and, like mentioned before, the onset of chronic disease, to name just a few. Unrefined salt, on the other hand, does not pose these health risks and should therefore be the salt of choice. In fact, unrefined salt possesses many remarkable healing properties and can, in some cases, actually promote the cure. The trace minerals found in unrefined salt, such as calcium and magnesium and potassium, can help maintain the proper cellular fluid balance. It can help restore proper acidity and alkalinity balance. It can support our adrenal gland function and even influence hormone imbalance and encourage good immune function and detoxification. The healing benefits of unrefined salt is truly remarkable, and we have only scratched the surface today. This brief listing is in no way meant to be taken as a treatment plan of any illness or health concern. I am not a doctor, and I do not claim to know what your body may need, but it is important to know that salt is not just sodium chloride. And just like our bread, it needs to be real and unrefined, just as God created it. After years of searching, Bread Becker's has chosen to carry Redmond's unrefined real salt. The salt is simply mined from the ground and contains at least 60 trace minerals. It gets its rusty red color from traces of iron and the black speckles from the manganese. Traces of magnesium add a rosy color, and these combine to give real salt an overall pinkish color and a slight sweetness. Now, a byproduct of mining salt is clay, so we also carry Redmond's bentonite clay, which is excellent for applying to burns and relieving upset stomach, especially when traveling to other countries. There are other uses of clay that we may discuss later, but for today, real salt and bentonite clay should be staples in any home. I am sure there are other sources of unrefined salt, but be aware there are many marketing words used to make you think a salt is unrefined when perhaps it might not be. For example, just because a label might say pink salt, sea salt, or even Himalayan salt does not necessarily mean that that salt has not been heat treated or stripped of its minerals. These terms only tell you the source, not the processing done to the salt. No two salt mines are alike, and the colors and minerals present may vary depending on the origin of the mine. The important thing to know is whether that salt is unrefined or not. Today, much like bread, salt has gained a bad reputation, but that is not the case in the Bible. Most of the mentions of salt are actually quite favorable. In the Old Testament, God instructed the Israelites to offer their grain offerings with salt. That's found in Leviticus 2:13. Salt was a symbol of a lasting covenant. Salt symbolizes new beginnings, as when Elisha tosses some salt into a spring to purify the waters, he is signaling a fresh start. The curse on the water is no more. The Jewish people have not forgotten their salt covenants with God. To this very day, every Friday evening, many practicing Jews still dip their bread into salt to keep their covenant with God. In the New Testament, in Jesus' own words, he declares that he is the real bread of life, John 6:35, and that we, his followers, are the salt of the earth. So the way I see it, you can't be the salt of the earth without having and knowing the real bread of life. When Jesus mentioned salt, everyone listening at least knew its primary role as a preservative. So with these words, Jesus is declaring to each of us our divine purpose. He is telling his disciples, as well as us today, that we are agents of preserving. God has placed us in this culture, in this time, in this moment, in this slice of history, to preserve his ways, the teachings of his life, the power and the presence of Christ. So as you gather this Memorial Day, I want to encourage you to not only have and enjoy some real unrefined salt, but also to be some unrefined salt to those around you. Thanks for listening today. Until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Beckers with Sue's Healthy Minutes.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated, located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.